much of the party, but I kind of saw an opportunity to.
That's the last time they had a leadership convention?
Yeah, can you believe that?
13 years.
Unbelievable. The Democratic,
she's done a good job, but on the other hand, she's still just her. So
she's done a great job, and we needed it. And I still kind of consider myself a green, but that's it is the Elizabeth May party. But we knew what we were getting. But yeah, she's done a great job. But so I'm a 10-time, like I said, a 10-time green, and now I've been red-pilled, brother. I can't get with the left ideology. You know what I mean? So I'm frustrated that way, but open enough to say, hey, I changed how I feel. So.
Well, some of the others have too. Patrick Moore has changed, and lots of Greens. Because the problem is, capitalism is better for the environment than the alternative. Because people, when they own property, usually maintain it, and but myself, I'm trying not to take plastic anywhere. So it's hard to do, carrying all my stuff home and carrying bags around me at all times and what have you. But I'm getting very disturbed with how the world can't handle the plastic.
All right, bro. So I think we're going good now. I'm just going to check to see. Who won tonight?
The Blue Jays, if you're talking about that.
Yeah.
They did. They look good. Their pitching looks terrific generally. And their hitters awoke enough today.
Awesome. All right, Marc Emery, I really appreciate your time, man. I've been chasing you for a long time. Bumped into your wife many years ago at a 420 rally, or not a rally, to the convention center. You were probably in jail in the States.
Yeah, I probably was. That was one of the early Lyft conferences, I think. Anyway, I'm coming back to Vancouver for the 420 this year, so Jody and I will be together on stage and in the Vancouver community, and certainly at the big 420 rally, which we hope gets the same amount of people as always.
So the Prince of Pot, you came by that. Man, you really earned that title. We talked a little bit just before, briefly, when we we're going on air here about Jack Harrer, some of the leaders of the movement back in the day, and you're one of those guys.
I got good stories about Jack. Jack came up in 1991 to London, Ontario. Back in those days, all books and magazines about cannabis were illegal in Canada from 1987 to 1994. So I started my campaign selling in 1991, in May 1991, I had Jack come up and autograph copies of his book. And we were also hoping to get arrested at the very same time. It took us 4 years before we did get arrested, but we struck down that part of the law in July 1994, but it took 7 years. So there's 7 years in Canada where you won't find High Times magazine around. And the 1985 print run of Grow Your Own Stone was seized by the RCMP, the entire print run, and burned. It's little things you don't know about in Canadian history, Canadian cannabis history.
Yeah, awesome. What's tell me about your frustration with the the new quote legalization and
well, it's not legalization. I wish people would never use that word. I call it Canada's dystopian legalization shit show. For example, there's a guy in Winnipeg only yesterday was sentenced to 10 months in jail for 85 grams of weed. I've got like 500 grams of weed in my own home here. The idea that somehow somebody can get 10 months jail for having what I consider a piddly amount, a ridiculously trivial amount of cannabis, is outlandish. Other people are getting 5 months to 6 months to a year for having pounds, but I sold like over 1,000 kilos and I didn't go to jail, right? I got a whopping fine, which if I don't pay, I will go to jail, and that's a possibility. But typically, we don't have legalization. The police in Ontario are giving out 21 to 25 tickets a day. That's 7,500, 8,000 tickets a year for cannabis in Ontario. So that's about the same rate as it was during the Prohibition. I don't think anything's changed except big corporate kahunas, a lot of whom are cops, are now able to sell at ridiculously high prices in these government monopoly outlets. It's very suspicious that no one in the cannabis culture is really involved in this legalization. These are all like carpetbaggers from the corporate world.
Regrets?
Oh, I never should have asked the government to legalize pot, and I should have told people we should never ask them. What we should do is tell the police to stop arresting us, which is an entirely different matter. Stop arresting us is obvious, but asking them to legalize it is letting them write the rules for our culture. And in the same way that homosexuals wouldn't write their code of conduct, have it written by heterosexuals, or vegans wouldn't have their dietary menu prescribed to them by meat eaters, and nor would Muslims want to have Jews or Christians telling them how to worship, the cannabis culture has been greatly insulted by having the government, our enemy of over 100 years, arrested 2.5 million of us. And now they want to be our exclusive monopoly distributors of our herb. They want to have their people train our people when they work in stores. You can see the whole message is that the government wants to obviously usurp the culture by teaching our employees in stores, monopolizing the distribution of cannabis, restricting the growth of it in factory farms, which will be the height of mediocrity at best, and excluding everybody who's actually involved in the culture. None of us are invited. You don't find anybody who's been growing weed for 10, 20 years. Suddenly they're now given a license and they're happily growing pot in their own little organic gardens. No, there's none of that going on.
Tell me about political affiliation. I know you've tried it here and there.
I've joined and voted for every party. I'm not kidding. If I go from one end of the spectrum, I certainly supported Elizabeth May in, I think, 2006. Jack Layton in the NDP 2004, again in 2008, even 2011, but by then it was clear he wasn't going to get anything done. We went backwards there. I supported the Liberals in the last election. I don't often do that. And I joined the Conservative Party to vote for Maxime Bernier for the leadership of that, and now I'm a member of the People's Party because I love Max. I think he's the best.
I like Max too, man. I don't know.
Max is great.
There's so many reasons you can say,
I relate to him on every level, even though he never talks about cannabis. You know, I know how he feels, but it's kind of a landmine to walk in the cannabis field, especially since it's really not something a lot of the members of the People's Party really get. They're mostly free marketeers, though, so there's a good core there. And I'm hoping they get 5 to 7% and Max gets reelected in his home riding of Beauce. I can't see them making dents anywhere else because the Trudeau's helped damage his own popularity. I don't believe Canadians are going to vote for someone who has a turban on. I'm sorry, they won't. Maybe that's my inherent racism or something, but I'm suspicious of Indian politics. I lived in India for a year. I'm suspicious of Sikh politics. And I don't think he relates to the Canadian ordinary person. His slick suits, his lawyer background, his Sikh background, to me, is not something I can relate to. And I don't think Canadians are going to relate to it, and I think the NDP is going to do get a bad response. And considering the Liberal are in trouble now, that greatly favors the Conservative because Andrew Scheer is as bland and uninspiring and is the same as every other politician you've ever heard, including Singh and Trudeau and Harper all rolled into one obsequious, kind of bilious, annoying thing.
We're lacking.
But he's going to win. He's going to win. Maybe only a minority, though. So we'll see what that produces.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, too. There's something to be said about minority governments. And did you ever get behind the proportional representation movement for Fair Vote Canada or anything like that?
Generally, I'm like most libertarian anarchistic types, is that I don't even believe in voting as a concept. I don't believe my vote, or rather my life, should be voted on. And so all these people voting for this representative every 4 years and giving them carte blanche to impose all these horrible laws on me, it goes against my nature, but I also want to engage in our political system because we don't have any alternatives. So when you say, do I favor proportional representation? Yeah, if everybody who got over 2% was represented, I'd find that fair because then libertarians would get elected enough to have some representatives, and pot people probably as well. I think pot people could get together 2% because we have an abomination in the Cannabis Act. So I would suspect most Canadians who smoke cannabis are very unhappy with the regime we've got. And if 2% was the threshold, then that would be worthwhile for libertarians, for cannabis people. Hell, you could get a whole bunch of fringe parties with representation. And then we'd really see some fun. right? Because you'd still get those mainstream parties with their 20-25%, but you'd probably have 10 smaller parties between 2 and 5%, and that would be so much fun. You know, we'd have to expand the parliament to about 450 seats from its 324 or 332.
Yeah, representation certainly would be better, and the minority.
Well, you're going to need half and half though. The first past the post got to be directly representing a region, and then there's going to be the party list. And you can't let the party list dominate all of Parliament. These are people who are indirectly elected. Like, you know, like if I vote for the marijuana party and the top 4 people get in because we got 3 or 4% of the vote, that's pretty indirect democracy handing power there. So there should always be at least half the members directly first past the post, and then the other half are proportional representatives.
There's different styles of it too.
Yeah, like so that everybody who gets over 2% is represented, but you're still going to need that direct accountability.
Gotcha. What do you got coming up? You're talking about, you're in Toronto now, right?
Yeah, well, I was traveling for 7 months since last August, and I was here in Toronto for 4 months. I'm here during the baseball season.
How long have you been out? When did you land in in Canada again?
I got out on April 14th, 2014, from that 5-year stint in the U.S. for selling seeds to Americans by mail. It started out as 28 to 40 years, so I was just grateful to get 5.
What were the politics behind that extradition? It was... I mean, I don't get enraged about many things, but
what I was doing, I did sell 3 million seeds to Americans. I was using that money to subvert their democracy. So I'll explain. I was spending that money like nobody's business when I got it. That's my brother there, and I was spending it. So I financed the 1998. Washington, D.C. Medical Marijuana Initiative, the Colorado 2000 Initiative, the Arizona 2002 Initiative. I threw money at the Alaska Initiatives 3 years in a row, 2002, 2000, 2004. And I was taking the U.S. federal government to court in Philadelphia in a class action suit. So I'm spending millions of dollars fighting in whatever way is possible. Like, for example, a Canadian guy like me paying for a ballot initiative in Colorado is quite amusing. First of all, it's not legal. I'm not allowed to spend money on U.S. elections, but it was really easy just to give my friends 10,000 here, 10,000 there, and end up paying for the whole thing, or a good chunk of it, because you had to go. We paid people to go get the signatures. You pay them about $1 a signature. In those days, it's probably more now, but it's still the way it's done. So we paid for the signatures to get it on the ballot, and then we won. And that's in 2000. That's the medical one. So I was having all sorts of fun sponsoring initiatives everywhere, rallies, marches, class action suits against the U.S. federal government. And I would boast about it as a way of getting people to buy my seeds. I would say, see, when you send me money for these seeds, not only do you get great seeds, but I'm going to fuck shit up in the United States with your money. And so it worked great. I gave over $5 million from 1995 to 2005. And so the DEA was watching this, and so I was giving them a lot of incentive to come after me. But how much money they spent, and 32 different U.S. Canadian organizations were involved, including Homeland Security, DEA, FBI, Internal Revenue Service, the U.S. Postal Service. It just goes on and on. It's staggering how many people were involved, and prosecutors. They bought seeds from me, for example, in every one of the United States. They ordered by mail. And when DEA makes a buy, they're not small buys, they're big buys. When the Agent Menendez, came and bought them from me in person,
Seriously?
he bought like $3,000 at a time, which is a big sale. And that guarantees that you're not going to get cold feet once they start dangling this huge amount of money. Because I was used to big purchasers, right? They were still like nice to get, $3,000. I didn't see many people come up with $3,000. And she didn't come just once. She came over a year and bought it from me 4 times, these kind of huge quantities, right? So they've got some serious money going on when they get you.
Unbelievable.
Well, the investigation was 2 years and 10 months long. And it started 3 days after I humiliated the drug czar John Walters when he came to visit Vancouver in November 2002. So you bet there was a lot of political motivation. That was a highly motivated extradition and arrest. I humiliated them. I was embarrassing them. And I was boasting about it. And people like that, you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah, I was thinking more of it. I know that certainly the American politics of it, but the Canadian politics, what got me, I said, we're really sending this guy down to the States.
He got 3,000 letters, exactly 3,001 letters opposing my extradition, and only 7 in favor. And they still extradited me. It's pretty beautiful. They got 3,000 handwritten letters against it, and that had no influence on them, which just goes to show you the government doesn't really give a fuck about your opinion once they're in power, no matter who they are. They do what they want to do, and they have political reasons for doing that. And it won't matter what, heck, it won't even matter what your own party wants. Look at the Prime Minister. He wants to make sure SNC Lavalin isn't prosecuted, and that's his, ultimate desire right at this moment. So, if he wants to make it happen, it happens. But if he doesn't, then you're in big trouble. So, I was embarrassing the U.S. government, embarrassing the Canadian government, boasting about all these things. So, I have no bad things to say about my prison experience. It was very, very wonderful in so many ways. I have nothing but fond memories of all my prisons that I've been into. I can tell you every one of them, where I was, how long. And for me, there was so much redemptive. I read 140 books in that 5 years. I learned to play bass guitar. I was in a rock and roll band for 3 years. I practiced on a musical instrument 2-3 hours a day. I couldn't believe I'm playing note-for-note versions of songs that I've grown up all my life loving, like Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix. I knew 7 of his songs. 3 Stevie Ray Vaughan songs. I knew how to play Come Together by the Beatles, Jumpin' Jack Flash. Bob Marley songs, Otis Redding songs, Nirvana. I can play Come As You Are and Smells Like Teen Spirit. I mean, I couldn't believe I was doing this, right? And, I enjoyed the quiet time. I wrote the best stuff I've ever written in my life in prison. Yeah. Typically, that's not uncommon. You can write some good quality material there because you get quality thinking time. In the real world, you don't get much quality thinking time. There's this distraction of our screens here. There's drugs, there's sex, there's pornography, there's the boredom of marriage, there's going to work, there's children, there's things. Always there's something to distract you. You really just don't get hour after hour of quality thinking time where you could meditate or you could write or you could think. And I really enjoyed that opportunity. But as many of the inmates will tell you wherever I was, I made the prison kind of like my office. I could make things happen in a way no one else could because I had people on the outside that could make phone calls happen or books arrive or, whatever somebody needed. Hard to believe that in a prison there's going to be guys who don't have their own Bible. But a couple of guys doing life came to me one day and said, I don't have a Bible. And they make a nice one that you can get your name in it. And I thought, sure, I'll absolutely get you this Bible. And actually, I probably got several Bibles, actually, for people. There's some better than normal Bibles out there. Insofar as, if you're going to be a lifer. 1 out of every 8 guys I was with, there would typically be about 150 to 160 guys in my unit, and at least 25 to 30 are doing life without parole. So I'd try never to say no to those guys if they needed a favor, because I couldn't imagine life without parole.
Wow. And Bibles being hard to get in prison doesn't seem like think of anything else that would be encouraging that, but...
Well, the religious people all get together. Like the Muslims are all together, the Christians. There's various kinds of Christians. Your religious people are going to be there, but that doesn't mean anybody's paying for your own, personal Bible or like that. You can get a cheap one because in prison books are abused, right? But there are some nice Bibles out there, so I would get those for occasion. I got a good story though about guys getting life without parole. Okay, it's almost all black guys, and it's almost all for crack cocaine. You'd be surprised. No, maybe you wouldn't be. But you'd be surprised how many guys were doing life for relatively small amounts of drugs. And for that matter, in 5 years, I never met what you'd call a kingpin. If there was one, he would have been introduced to me. But I never met any kingpins. I always met just the low-level drug mules, and they end up getting, life without parole. There's this one guy, Nate Carter. And at first, he really annoyed me when I got to prison because he had a loud, scratchy voice, and he was very animated during any American football game and any American basketball game. He was a big fan of LeBron James, and prisons usually divided between LeBron haters and LeBron fans. And they love going at it with each other, razzing each other. And they razz each other fairly loud. And because blacks constitute a clear majority in any prison, you're not going to argue with them. And anyway, at first I'm thinking, that guy is really loud. And then my cellmate said, yeah, but he's a really good guy, actually, when you get to know him. And besides, he's doing life without parole. So are you going to go tell him? And that's when I learned you don't ever tell people who are doing life without parole to shut up or be quiet or anything, because they could go crazy and they have nothing to lose. As it turns out, most of them are incredibly civil guys, considering from my perspective, they have nothing to lose. Anyway, over the years that goes by, and one day I used to get all the legal news because I used to be the jailhouse lawyer in a lot of places. And I got a note from someone who said, Mark, the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, is going to kick guys out, is what he says, who are doing long, non-violent terms over 10 years. Over 20 years, who have served over 10 years. So one day I say to Nate, hey, the Attorney General's got something new. Nate, how long you been here? He says, 18 years. I said, what's your sentence is life without parole, right? He says, yeah. I said, well, listen, do you have any violence in your past at all? And he goes, no, nothing. So I said, well, Nate, you should fill this forms out and send them in. He says, no, I do it every year. Nothing ever happens. I'm not doing it. I said, you really should do it, Nate, because this is meant for you. I'm sure before, yes, with Clinton and Bush, it was useless. But Obama might really be serious. Anyway, weeks go by. I badger him every day. And then finally one day he says, okay, if you help me, I'll do it. But he says, but I've done it before, and nothing's going to happen. So sure enough, anyway, we fill it out, and that's where I learn all about him. I go, Nate, have you ever had any violent infractions in the prison? That's important, too. And he goes, no, I've never even had an infraction. I said, Nate, I have had 3 infractions, and I'm a normal human being in this prison, and I have 3 infractions. How can you have been here 18 years and not even have a slight infraction? He says, well, I don't. I said, well, that's going to look really good. So we write all this down, we send it to the government, and I get released. Huzzah. And I come home, and I forget all about Nate Carter, unfortunately, until 2 years later, in May 2016, he calls me and says, Mark, I just got a letter from the president. I'm going to get out in July with no strings attached. I got that executive clemency. And he goes, Mark, you made me do it. Thank you so much, and God bless you. And every 3 weeks, he calls me up wherever I am in the world, and he says, Mark, where are you? And I say where I am, which the last time was actually, I think, Barcelona. And he says, well, Mark, I love life. I love my family. I love freedom. God bless you. Thanks for everything. And he always asks how Jody is, too, because he used to see Jody come and visit me. Whenever he had a visit, Jody'd be there with me. And so he always got used to seeing her, and everybody kind of got used to Jody because she came to see me 81 times, which is another amazing story. Because 81 visits to me, 14 hours it took her to go from Vancouver to either Georgia, southeast Georgia, like as far away as you, or Mississippi, 14 hours to get there, and another 14 hours on the Monday to go back. So she visited me 81 times. That's 162 days in travel, 5.5 months of her life, and 162 days sitting beside me for 5 hours a day, and that's 5.5 hours, or 5.5 months of her life there, too. So 11 months of her whole life was either traveling to see me or sitting beside me during that 5 years. So I'm really lucky about that. Anyway, Nate always calls me up every 3 weeks. And that's the best thing that I ever did in all the time I was in prison. I'm really pleased about a lot of things I did. I was jailhouse lawyer for a lot of people, and I didn't need to charge anybody anything because I was well supported by my wife and what have you. So the guys in the prison tended to be real nice to me everywhere. And that's my best story. Nate Carter is out because I badgered him into sending for an executive clemency to President Obama, and he got it. And he's also got a letter from the president, which I don't have. So he's good for him. He's got an autographed letter from President Obama. And he's out of prison, and he calls me up, and it makes me feel really good when he calls me. Which goes to show you can do a lot in prison.
Wow.
Like a lot of satisfying things. I've got dozens of stories of being able to help people do stuff or just plain strange things that happen to you in prison that kind of teach you a lesson.
How old are you now, Mark?
61.
61, and so what are you working on? What's the future look like for Marc Emery now?
Well, I'm actually in a state of flux. I've been traveling for 7 months, and I used up a lot of money. So now I have to start thinking about what I'm going to do for work, or what I'm going to work for, or what I'm going to do.
Cannabis culture? What, you sold out of that, or?
Jody owns that.
Oh, okay.
Jody runs it. Okay. So I gave it to her for $1 in 2010. I did think I would get it back. We had quite a bit of arguments about that for a while. But ultimately, she prevailed because she said, well, Marc, I've been doing this for 5 years, and now you come back. I don't know if I can be your sidekick anymore. I've been running everything for 5 years. Being your sidekick isn't very appealing. She said, you could just travel around the world. Everybody loves you. Travel doesn't appeal to Jody in the same way because for her, it's just not that pleasant. She's an introvert. I'm an extrovert, so she's correct. I love traveling. I love meeting people. Everybody is great to me everywhere I go. Whenever people ask me, is a place safe or are people friendly, I say they're all safe and they're all friendly. That's my experience. As soon as somebody mugs me, I'll tell you that place is not safe and not friendly. But otherwise, you know, everywhere I go, travel is a beautiful thing. And I'm having trouble decompressing because life is so boring here. I mean, I've been doing all my tasks and stuff. I had a lot to do when I got back, but it's like done in 5 days now. I've got dental work on Friday, which is why I'm back in Canada at all. I'm supposed to be in Greece right now, Santorini. And that is a lot more appealing than the gray Toronto April that is going on here. Oh, my goodness.
What do you
and there aren't many pretty buildings in Canada. Like, I've been to Europe, Spain, and France, and South Africa, and Morocco, and all the major capitals of South America, you know, Mexico. There's just not a lot of beauty in Toronto. It's nice. I like living here, but it's just not a beautiful place.
So I guess it's fair to say. So you're a member of the PPC then. So I hate to bring it back to politics all the time, but I'm just fascinated by, you know, your...
Max is great. I hope he gets a lot of support.
Yeah. Huh.
I like the guy a lot. To me, he resonates. He's so sincere. He's right on the money. Stop pandering. We need a politician who doesn't pander.
Well, and this is it. I mean, I was talking to a buddy of mine, Greg Vesna. I don't know if you know the name, but he's been around a long time, and he's Monia business, early days.
There's
of the
a
Green
trophy
Party.
named after him. I'm just kidding you.
And just, you know, we're hopeful people, and we get sucked in. We drank the Kool-Aid on Justin. We were so glad to get rid of Harper.
You, though, he got a lot of votes from us. He's going to miss them.
Yeah, we were so damn ready to get rid of Harper that. And
we did great under Harper. That's the problem. Things got really good with Harper. We all started opening shops up and breaking the law and getting away with it.
But him and I were talking the other day. He's like, Jimmy, I helped him get elected as leader. Well, are you like, we all drunk the Kool-Aid because not as influential some of us, but. So are you gonna do anything for the party? Do you think, other than just support him?
I'll give him the maximum amount, and I will help out on any campaign. But he probably doesn't need a guy as controversial and notorious as I am.
I don't think Max is afraid of controversy at all. That's what I like about him. He just says it, and there's a lot that needs to be said right now. Sorry to cut you off, Marc.
You don't want candidates who necessarily distract from the leader's message. See, Max's message is really good. So high-profile candidates are desirable, yes, if they let people focus on the message. And to some degree, now here's the thing I like, though. In the riding of Burnaby South, where the by-election was held, right, the People's Party candidate did like 11% and only did like 3 to 4% in the other ridings, the other 3 ridings in the by-election, right? So they did really great in Burnaby. But during that campaign, the Conservative guy said, Marc Emery's endorsing Maxime Bernier, the Prince of Pot, wants to legalize pot, and he thinks Max is great. And quoted me and put this all around town on these posters, and and then the People's Party candidate got all indignant about it and raised a fuss. But the fact is, she did 3 times better than any other riding. So I'm going to take a little bit of credit for that.
There you go.
And that some of my people saw that and said, "Well, Marc likes Maxime Bernier. I got to get out and vote for him."
How does Marc Emery get away these days with the political correctness culture?
Well, you don't. I've been publicly shamed over something as trivial that happened 10, 15 years ago, and that I contest is completely distorted because people today can resent or regret activities they embraced 10, 15 years ago when they have a change in personal philosophy.
Amen.
They can change the way they look at the same event. I'll give you an extreme example.
That can happen on a daily basis, but I get what you're saying.
I went to an orgy once in 2000, November 2000, and I took some women with me. If you ask those women today what they think about going to that orgy, their response is going to be different than what they thought at the time, right? My response might even be different, right? Because we look at things differently over time. And other people discover Christ, they discover religion. When women have babies, they get very conservative, right? So whereas they were wild, hard-living, fast-living times before a baby, once the baby's born, they go through a kind of a conservative transformation.
Protection.
This is why
everything
the
changes. You need to protect
is
the baby.
The highly sought-after electorate ideal, because these are typically conservative people who have children who show up to vote because they have a vested interest. So all these things, and then we have the identity politics that's practiced today on the campuses and coming from our academia. And everybody in this kind of post-Marxist world is looked at as either someone with power or someone who doesn't have power, someone who oppresses or someone who is oppressed. In other words, every relationship breaks down into male-female, black-white, rich-poor, working-class, like, and there's no end to that kind of division. And so as long as you think like that, that's a doomed philosophy. I just like to think that everybody overall in Canada gets a fair shake at what we have to offer as a nation and as a culture. And compared to 93% of women, for example, in Egypt who go through female genital mutilation, or all the poverty I've seen around the world, all the exclusion, when you look at Latin America and you look at Africa and you look at Southern Europe and you look at Asia, I think the status of women, for example, and gay people is superior in Canada to almost anywhere when it comes to freedoms, liberties, protections, safeties, health. All those outcomes are much more favorable here than anywhere else in the world. So you got to be careful about the people who hate this country that want to cause division, right? But I've heard these extreme things too. When I was in prison in the U.S., they would go, "Marc, Harper is so awful. He's changed everything. You won't even recognize the country." I came back, it looked just the same. It sounded the same. And then they voted Harper out a year later, and now nobody talks about, oh, Harper permanently changed the landscape, or Harper made the country unrecognizable. It's not unrecognizable. Just like I hear the same thing now from the conservatives whining about Justin Trudeau. Oh, he's ruining the country. He's wrecking. It's not wrecked. It's not ruined. It takes more than a politician to ruin this country, for God's sake. And they do lots of damage. But Canada is much too big for one person, even over a generation, to really adversely affect. Canada's made up of Canadians. The politicians are really just at the back of the flock trying to follow the people ahead and try to get ahead of the popular wave. But politicians don't change I don't think they change the nature of this country. I think the people do. And that's why I'm worried about what goes on in academia, because this is where all our young people are learning all their, philosophy from.
And yeah, man, you said a mouthful there. And just before we went live, I was kind of venting my frustration of the political shift that I've had. I mean, I've run in 10.
Well, you turned right wing like so many people, appalled with the left.
Well, I am very concerned with my freedom of speech and yours, and everyone else, and every idiot,
you're free to say anything as long as it doesn't trigger any one of 100 different intersectional groups who are easily offended, and your microaggressions are making life unsafe for them. In fact, your words are violence if you listen to them. And
preach, Marc Emery, preach, man.
Here's the thing, though. That's why freedom of speech really is in danger, and why young people embrace socialism and don't really care much about freedom of speech. It's funny too. I was thinking what a marvel technology is, what it can do for us. I'll give you the great thing about it. This device here, I pay $10.77 every month, and I have access to 76 million recorded songs. In fact, the entire pantheon of recorded music is available for $10.99 every month. When I was a kid, for $10, you got 10 songs on vinyl that would deteriorate over time, and that $10 was worth like $100 today, right? So my one record purchase would probably buy the equivalent of 1 year of Google Play, and it's $76 million. Now, here's what I want to know. Anybody that has access to every song ever recorded for $10 a month has no right to complain about shit. Nothing. You spoiled and grateful child. You should be kissing an image of Steve Jobs every day,
Emery,
and sing with Sergey Brin
for Prime Minister, man.
Every song,
this is so true, man.
As often as you like for $10 a month.
This is becoming the narrative, I think, of Ben Shapiro. You're going to complain about living in the best time that we've ever been in.
Hey,
there's no one starving in North America. Well, very few people are starving in North America, and the poor have iPhones. So, yeah, and what you're complaining about gender pronouns?
I got a toothache in Paris that within 48 hours became a rampant infection, which 85 years ago would have killed me because we didn't invent antibiotics and it didn't become commonly until 1945.
So little gratitude.
So I'm thinking, gee, I would have had to have my whole mouth operated on. I might have died. I would have lost a lot of my face because I had an infection I can't do anything about. But instead, it cost me like $10 in antibiotics. And now I'm cured, getting dental surgery later on this week. That'll cost me. But the point is that we live in an age of miracles. Ages of miracles. Can you imagine when I was born, we didn't even have socialized medicine, if you think that's a good thing. And so healthcare has gotten so much better for people. They have so many more options. You can read about everything now. You can find out about your own health choices better than you ever could before. You have access to herbs and pills and whatever kind of doctor you want, right? If you're thinking, if you're sentient, if you're embracing this world, there's unbelievable treasures every day, everywhere. So the idea, too, that we need to find hate, we need to find division, we need to encourage comparatives. Whenever you compare yourself with someone else, you're going to lose because half the world is better off and half the world is not better off than you are. And half the world is probably more talented than you are and half the world isn't. And there's a whole bunch of advantages. We all have advantages and disadvantages when we compare, which is why it's fruitless to do so. We should all be grateful we're alive, and whatever we've got, we're lucky to have. And let's hope for the best in staying healthy and living a long, prosperous life. That should be about it.
I consider you a forward thinker. I hope you're not flattered too much by that. But and just talking,
it might not be true either.
And just a couple things you said there, as far as sometimes, well, a lot of the times, simple things like penicillin or insulin come from the radical extremes, right? And we look at these people like they're actually witchcraft, practicing. I mean, you look at history, and some of the solutions that we adopted come from the radical extremes. If you were to forecast out, what do you think you could say that something that feels extreme now that might be common practice in no time? Anything?
Well, I think all technology feels extreme. Like the iPhone was pretty amazing then. It's pretty amazing now. But I know when they discovered penicillin, Fleming discovered penicillin by mold on bread applied to a bacteria, diminished the bacteria.
Yeah, they wanted to have them committed, didn't they?
It's a pretty trippy kind of thing, You got all this bread mold. It's like somebody's thinking the guy's a bachelor who just won't clean the fuck up. And then next thing you know, he's saving millions of people around the world. Right. By the way, there's a great book about that, too, called A Brilliant Radiance, about how penicillin was discovered and what a group effort it was. And how when we really want to mobilize our resources, we can do incredible things in a short period of time. Because that went from the discovery of its practical application in 1938, 39, to it being available to every human in North America for 2 cents a dose by 1945. So we went from you were going to die if you got a lot of these infections in 1939 to you're going to live for sure. That's incredible stuff that we have put behind us. It bothers me when I see people don't like vaccinations. I mean, I wish I had a chickenpox vaccination when I was a kid. It wasn't around then. So I'm not at any risk of getting shingles. It would be nice if I were vaccinated for that. In my day, of course, they made us all get it together. So I got measles, German measles, red measles, chickenpox, mumps, you name it. I've had all of those things, right? And generally that was good because I don't know anybody who had complications when I was a kid from any of that stuff. But it's possible, I suppose. And everybody being vaccinated would probably have been preferred. I got certainly the polio vaccine and diphtheria and tuberculosis. And, I haven't had any of those diseases in my life, so that obviously all worked out.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, Marc. What else you got coming up we can look forward to?
Well, I'll be in Vancouver for 420, the 25th anniversary. See me there. And at the head of the parade at the Global Marijuana March in San Jose, Costa Rica. At the first Cultivators Cup on the weekend of May 23, 24 in Ocho Rios. And then I'm here writing my book. I've got to start work on that on June 3rd. And then I start traveling again in November. And in the meantime, I hope to see a lot of Blue Jay games while I'm here. That's my agenda.
Sounds like a good one, brother.
Well, the election's in this time too, right? So for the next 5-6 months, we've got a national election. Naturally, I'm going to get people to try and support Max. But, you know, it's tough because they're going to want to either get rid of Trudeau or keep Trudeau. So that means either voting Liberal or voting for someone who can beat the Liberal. And it's always hard to get people when they're starting out to get that wave going. Yeah,
and, you know, I've been talking about Vez. He actually sat here. I did an interview with him the other day, and he, if you can believe this, he's suggesting voting strategically. Anyone but Liberal.
Well, you know what?
Greg Vez sat right there.
In your own riding. In your own riding. It doesn't work on any other level because you only get one vote. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean practically, voting strategy? It means voting for the person who you think is most likely to beat the guy you don't like. Okay, well, your guy you don't like may not be the same as, you know, like, you got to decide, okay, who is it you don't like? What if you already have an NDP member? Are you going to vote NDP because that's keeping the Trudeau Liberals at bay, or you're denying your vote to them, or are you going to vote for the Conservatives? And determining who has the upper hand at any given point. Remember, Trudeau was in third up till a week before the election that made him prime minister, and then he soared ahead of the NDP, right? So people decided that they wanted to take a chance on him. And we don't have Mulcair. If Mulcair were still the leader of the NDP, he'd probably be forming the next government. But he isn't.
Weak leadership all the way around in politics.
Well, Singh has gotten to the point where his audience is national and larger than Brampton. In Brampton, you can get elected as a member of parliament. You can even get elected as the NDP leader in Burnaby South. But you can't. You're not going to influence this country, I think, if you're a Sikh wearing a turban, coming from a distinctly Sikh background. I don't think Canadians are going to see the universality of that. I don't think they're going to say that as Canadianness. And I'm not suggesting that's a white thing. I mean, we have French Canadians, we have women, we have Native legislators, we have Chinese, we have Hindu, we have people from all the areas in Canada, but as a leader of a socialist party.
And that's what concerns me more than anything. But and I say the same thing about Bernier. You know, it's hard to take a guy serious with that damn French accent. I'm sorry.
See, I think,
people are going to call you racist or say it's got nothing to do with politics or whatever. I know you've heard it all before. I get it too, especially when you go against the grain.
Accent. I don't feel
I know. I mean, I'm just saying.
Official language. Right? To me, he's telling me the truth in both official languages, whereas all the rest are telling me lies in both official languages. And I think Singh, for example, is the best speaker out of the three of them, but he's just not someone I have any trust or confidence in. And hey, I've actually read the history of Sikhism. I'm one of the few white guys you're ever going to meet that can tell you the difference between the first guru and the 10th guru, and when they were around, and all about what's going on in Khalistan or / the Punjab. I lived in India for a year. Some of my favorite writers in India typically are Sikhs because they write in English a lot and they're awesome. But it doesn't mean I really have lost any sense that everybody I know who's Sikh or Indian, East Indian, who's been elected in Canada has had to use dicey, dodgy methods of getting those nominations. Heck, I've seen dead people resurrected for, the Ujjal Dosanjh premiership in 2001. Where the Sikh community mobilized various writings. I mean, people bring their politics with them from their country of origin, and so you should be very wary of any Asian political machine, right? Let alone of any ideological left-wing, right-wing political machines, this sort of thing. So I wouldn't vote for Andrew Scheer because he's not principled. I can't vote for Trudeau because he gave us the Cannabis Act. and I can't vote for the NDP because they support all this identity politics and, irrational economic proposals and plans. I would say my support would be, Elizabeth May on one hand, because she's trustworthy and sincere, and I don't think she's trying to lie to me, even if I think she's wrong on some issues. And Maxime Bernier, who I do agree with everything, and I think his English is very charming, actually. I think he's a decent gentleman, and it comes off just like the guy I love the most in my whole lifetime, Ron Paul, the U.S. representative, was the greatest of all statesmen in the Congress, a fabulous person, a mentor to me, and someone I love. I think Max has a lot of Ron Paul in him, so I'm excited to and hope that Max can keep his seat and build that party.
Well, integrity's lacking everywhere, and when you see it in politics, it's almost like you're surprised
but people
by
don't value it, though. Like, people talk like they value it, but they don't really value it, or they'd all be on Max's side, because Max reeks integrity. But the problem with integrity is you're going to end up saying things that offend people who want you to pander to them. It could be a dairy monopoly. It could be, an ethnic group. It could be young people. It could be old people. It could be veterans. It's hard not to pander to people when given the opportunity if you're a politician, because you want people to like you. And it's not your money. It's someone else's money. So fuck it. Go crazy with buying people off and pandering to them. Max shows a lot of nerve by saying, I'm not going to do any of that. And we're going to watch him to make sure he doesn't do any of that.
Yeah, he's not afraid to take a chance. I had him for about 40 minutes there a couple of weeks ago.
Max is not taking a chance. It's what Max believes. He's just not going to change who
he
is.
Politically.
He's got this far by being Max. He's going to keep
Fair enough.
being.
Yeah. And leaving the question open to his candidates on abortion, I think it's interesting, especially when the next thing out of his mouth is, and if you elect PPC member, don't be surprised if a private members bill comes before. We got to stop those. The problem is abortion laws can never be enforced because you're always going to either arrest the doctor. So if abortion is murder, that means as the boyfriend, if I suggest you should have an abortion, I'm counseling to murder. Your doctor is counseling you to murder. Your family is counseling you to murder. It's just ridiculous to start talking about abortion being equivalent to murder because that means everybody who had any say in the decision is going to be up. It's just nutty. We shouldn't be telling people what to do with doctors or drugs they take or abortions they get. And I get it, when I was 17, my girlfriend had an abortion at 5 months. And it was possibly the most traumatic thing I've ever been through myself. And sometimes, I wonder, about that. But at the same time, I don't want people telling me what's going on. You don't know my life. Stay well away from those kind of decisions. And if mistakes are made, mistakes are made. People got to accept their decisions. But I don't trust other people telling me about things like that. And I was only 17, And she was only 17. My doctor wanted us to have children. That's somewhat of a fascinating story, but that's for another time. That's for the next show. Yeah, brother. I appreciate that. Just before I get, who are you trusting to give you news these days?
Well, I listen to mostly mainstream things because they still have old-fashioned editorial techniques like fact-checking, grammar, confirming a source, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is as the person involved in a recent public shaming in January, I had all these people, global news, newspapers, reporting basically what they admitted was uncorroborated, unverified, unproven. But we need the clickbait, so it's hot, so we'll get it out there, right? So journalism is definitely diminished as to the degree of quality and verification, confirmation, because it takes time to get the story right. Whereas it takes no time just to repeat something verbatim and get it out there and try and capitalize on the clickbait, right? Because that's all it is anymore. In the old days, you kept on top of a story until the story was resolved. But that's not that profitable. That requires some deep investigation, somebody on it. Whereas getting the story the first time or in time for the wave is what's regarded as important now. So I get my news from all the usual sources. I don't actually trust alternate news until I see a major media confirmation. Because, I trust the New York Times to at least spend money on an issue, even if they have a bias. What people forget is the New York Times employs hundreds of people, and it covers the extreme spectrums, left, right, vegan, individualist, transphobic, and trans-positive, and all these other things in between. So, of course, any really good media you're going to be incensed by occasionally, as well as in agreement with occasionally, and possibly neutral the majority of times, because I don't feel we should have to take a side when we read a story. A lot of times it's just information we can think about. There's nothing that can be done. For the ordinary people, 99% of the things we read are things we cannot do anything about, right? Like an earthquake in somebody. You could give money, the weather, forest fires around the world, you know, or climate change. You could change a few things. We could use less plastic maybe, or, you know, minor things, but most things are out of our hands. There's really no point in reading a lot of news. Even this Trudeau thing, have you seen how much oxygen? I'm buying newspapers now, and the National Post, I think, had 8 pages solid about SNC Lavalin. It's just not worth that much.
And
Stop it.
I hear you.
Like it's just the usual business of Parliament, and that's usually fairly corrupt. But
true enough. I appreciate your comments about the clickbait. The other day, somebody was testifying, and I had Fox on one, Fox in the States on one channel, CNN on the other channel, and I couldn't even, I don't watch either one of them, but I just wanted to see what they look like side by side. And then the next day, we had the Canadian version of it. So CTV and CBC, you can't even believe the difference between the headlines and the graphics they're putting up to. And I'm thinking, hey, these are kind of, you know, you're talking about the, you know, the left wing in our institutions and our learning institutions, universities. It's certainly inherent in our media as well. We don't really have a conservative slanted news outlet that says, hey, yeah, we're conservative and we're going to present conservative news. These guys are presenting themselves as you know, unbiased, and my feeling is that they're not. And I'm surprised that.
Well,
and I get your verification.
$500 million from the federal government every year in a subsidy now. It's going to make a lot of people very reluctant to criticize the federal government when they're doling out these massive amounts of cash, which are going to probably keep a lot of old businesses propped up that probably should be moving on. But at the same time, CBC should compete on the same playing field as all the rest. Right? The idea of subsidizing CBC is probably increasingly unpopular with young people, because I'm sure only mostly older people are listening to CBC, right? I don't think that's a bastion of young people getting their cultural, you know, stimulation from. I don't see that at all. Anyway, listen, I'm going to run out of power. It's been fun.
Okay, brother. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Anytime.
All right.
All right.
Soon.
Over and out.
Thanks, Marc. That was all right, eh? Peace out, yeah.